Wednesday night prayer meeting. That's all right. That's a good problem to have. We're out of handouts. I don't know what the deal is tonight, but these two sections, y'all got to get right with God, get some of that crowd around you right with the Lord, because everybody's over here on this side. But I appreciate you being here tonight. I really do. I know we got a bunch of folks gone. I know we've got death going on in one of our church families, and that's keeping some people away as well. But I'm thankful for you being here tonight. I want to remind you, as always, on Wednesday night, remember our team kids back in the back. Be praying for them that they'll have a great time back there. And then remember our teenagers across the street at the camp, for Stephen, for all the adult workers, for everybody that's over there. They've been having great crowds of teens down there, 30, 40 teenagers every Wednesday night, and they're having a great time. A very young youth group now, whereas for the last several years, our youth group has been 10, 11, 12th graders. Now it's becoming more 7th, 8th, 9th graders. I know Stephen's excited about having these younger kids come in and being involved in the church, so we're excited about that. So remember them tonight and pray for them while they're having their service there. Don't forget, on our prayer list, we've got a number of folks. I want to especially remind you to remember the family of Miss Nellie Shirley. As most of you know, Miss Shirley passed away this last weekend. Her funeral service is going to be Friday up at Chapel Hill. The visitation is going to be from 11 to 1, and then the funeral service will be at 1 o'clock at Chapel Hill. Just talked to Larry again just a few minutes ago, and they're doing okay. I mean, they know where their mom is, no doubt about that, and I know that gives them a lot of peace about the thing, but I do want you to pray for them. I know it's going to be a big adjustment letting her go after her long life and all the influence that she exerted on them. So please remember the family. If you can come up Friday to the funeral home at Chapel Hill, be a part of either the visitation, the funeral, or both. I know that would mean a lot to the family, so I encourage you to do what you can there. And then down our prayer list at Health South, Miss Jean Harper. Did Jean get to come home yet, Brother Tom? She got to come home. That's wonderful. I know she was thrilled to get home. I know Ronald was thrilled to have her home, because it's been, 3 weeks or so since she's either been in the hospital or been in Health South for 3, 4, 5 weeks now. So I know it's been an ordeal for them. And I know we're all praying that the day will come soon where they'll be able to be in church and get out and enjoy themselves. So you be praying that day will be coming soon. Down our prayer list, I want you to continue to pray for Danny Lynch, for Debbie Mange, for Derek Morris. I want you to say a special prayer for Miss Edna Owen. Please remember Miss Edna and the family. Pray for her kids, for Robin, for Jeff, for all the grandkids, extended family. Miss Edna knows that time is drawing very, very close, and I just want you to pray for her. Pray that God's grace will be real, and that His strength, not only for her, but for her family, that they'll find it to be sufficient during this time of sorrow. So please pray for them in a very special way. Brittany Shoemaker, one of our newest members, I want you to be praying for Brittany. Brittany was having some health issues. I know the family would appreciate your prayers for her, so please remember her. For Candace White, I've been mentioning Brian and Candace for months now. Of course, Candace and Brian over in Georgia, former members here until job moved them away, and Candace, struggling with breast cancer, has already been through a bunch of the treatment. Will be having surgery here in just a few days. Please remember them. Pray for them that God will help in that situation that they're going through. And then for Lewis and Betty Brown, for Robert and Thelma Bird, James and Doris Kaufman, all these couples much in need of prayer. Bobby and Gail Fulton the same way. Miss Tina Griswood. For Richard and Vicki Haynes, remember them. Miss Jackie Hurst, as always. Jim and Mary Payne, another couple and another family that needs our prayers, so please think about them and pray for them. For Miss Carolyn Wallace, for Brother Grady Young, for Miss Barbara Wright, remember all of those. And then all of our shut-ins, all of our people that are in the military, all the families that are affected there. Please continue to pray for them, thinking about them, and I know they would certainly covet your prayers. Anybody else have somebody? Yes, sir. Good gracious. Let's remember both those requests from the family and pray for God to be with the two individuals and also for all the family. I know that's a lot to take in at one time, and so let's pray for them. Pray that God will help there. Anybody else? Yes. Absolutely. Let's remember that. Pray that they'll get that blood pressure under control and everything will go smoothly there. But let's remember the family and pray for them. Yes, ma'am. Yes. All right. Let's remember that family and be praying for them as well. That's all right. That's all right, brother. Hey, there you go. There you go. Anybody else? Brother Rick. Goodness. Let's remember that family. That's so much for any one family to have to deal with at the same time. So please remember that family. Pray for them. Pray for God's mercy and help in that situation. Anybody else? I don't want to miss anybody. Well, all right. Well, let's bow for a word of prayer and let's just ask God. I know that it's impossible for any of us to remember every name, but God knows each one. And let's ask Him to bless these families. Mike Jernigan, Mike, if you would, you lead us in a word of prayer tonight. Amen. Amen. Thank you so much for that. And I want to encourage you, continue to pray for all these families, not just tonight, but in the days ahead, that the Lord will help them be a part of what they're going through. Well, I want to take you back to where we've been for the last several weeks in the book of Ruth. Now, just to kind of reset the table of where we're at, the book of Ruth is one of the great stories in the Old Testament. It's one of only 2 books in the Bible that's named after a woman. And in fact, I'm saying Ruth. Esther. Ruth is the other book that's named after a woman. So, Brother Jerry, I'm right there with you on these dates and times and everything else. So, but we're talking about Esther. Let me get back to Esther. Esther is one of the great stories in the Bible. And the way we're coming at this is we're taking this, studying this book and just talking about a God who will protect you. Now, here's what's strange about the book of Esther, and I've mentioned this several times. That is, nowhere in the book of Esther is God's name even mentioned. You won't find one reference to God in the book of Esther. But here's what you can't miss. God is everywhere in the story. Even though He's never mentioned by name, you see His presence, you see Him working, you see God moving. And this is what we've been talking about. There are so many times in our life where we feel like God's not with us, that God's presence isn't nearby. But what I want to assure you is, if you belong to Him, He is a God who will always be there and who will always help you. Now, here's the story of the book of Esther. Esther, and here's the best way I can describe this, and I've used this before down through the years. Here's a way to think about it, because when I start talking about Babylonian Empire and the Medes and the Persians and Israel, a lot of people are like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Think about it this way. 30 years ago, the United States was involved in the Cold War with Russia, the old Soviet empire. Let's just imagine for a second, I know this is hard to think about, but let's imagine for a second that Cold War with the Soviet empire had turned into a hot war, an actual war. And let's say that the United States had been defeated by the former Soviet Union, modern-day Russia. And let's say that at the end of that war, after Russia had defeated our nation, they sent troops to occupy this country, and they took thousands and thousands of young Americans and shipped them to Russia to serve as servants and slaves and to grow up there and spend the rest of their lives there, never to return. Well, that's what actually happens in the Old Testament. Only it's Israel and it's the Babylonians, not the Russians. But the Babylonian Empire had conquered what had once been the land of Israel. They had sent thousands of young Jewish boys and girls off to Babylon, hundreds of miles away, and there they had grown up. It's the only life they've ever known. Well, during that period that lasted over 50 years, there's a couple that came together. All we know is their name, and I'm not going to mention it because nobody remembers that part of the story, but they had a daughter named Esther. Esther was born in captivity. It would be just like if those Americans got shipped to Russia, and during the next 50 years, some of those Americans ended up marrying each other because those are the only people they know, and they have children that grow up in Russia. That's what happened to Esther. She grew up in the Babylonian Empire, which eventually became the Mede-Persian Empire, and this is all she's ever known. Now, to make matters even worse for Esther, along the way, both of her parents died when she was very young. We don't know how, we don't know the circumstances, we don't know what actually occurred, we just know they died. Fortunately for Esther, in that country as well, she had an uncle whose name was Mordecai. Now, Mordecai is her uncle, and Mordecai realizes Esther's mom and dad are now gone. She's a young girl, she's got nobody to look after her, so he brings her into his family and raises her as if she was his own daughter. Loves her just like she was his own daughter, cares for her, and she grows up into being this beautiful young girl. Now, the other side of the story, while all that's going on, the king of this land where they're now living gets into a spat with his wife. We talked about that. That's back in chapter 1. The king and his wife, who's the queen, of course, they get into this ugly situation, and the king ends up banishing her from the country and removing her as queen and divorcing her. So now he needs a new queen. So the idea that they came up with was, we're going to have this contest, and we're going to bring in all the most beautiful young girls in all the land, and we're going to let the king pick out a new wife. They'll come in, they'll see the king, they'll spend time with him. He'll decide which of them he wants to be his new queen. So there were, and again, we don't know all the details of how this worked. We just know somebody picked out all the beautiful women all over the empire. Well, living right in the capital city, she didn't live in Esther and Mordecai lived right in the capital city where the king's palace is. Somebody noticed her and said, you need to be a part of this contest. So now Esther, this young Jewish girl, is brought into this group to become one of these contestants to be the next queen of the empire. Now, her uncle, Mordecai, told her one thing, and this is so important as we move into this part of the story tonight. The one thing Mordecai told her was this. He said, don't tell anybody that you're Jewish. He said that could cause you problems. Because everywhere the Jews have lived throughout all of time, there's been persecution, there's been trouble, there's been all kinds of things happen their way. So he says, listen, don't tell anybody. You just be you, and you just do what you're supposed to do, but don't tell anyone that you're Jewish. So she doesn't. She ends up meeting the king, and lo and behold, the king falls in love with Esther, immediately ends the contest, sends everybody else home, and marries Esther. Now she's the queen of the empire. It's an amazing story. Here she is, this little Jewish girl who's an orphan, and now she's the queen. So everything looks like this is great. Mordecai can finally relax because now, he can say, well, I don't have to worry about her anymore. She's going to be well taken care of. She's going to be the queen. She'll be provided for. So it looks like everything's good. But then, as we talked about last week, the villain of the story emerges. His name is Haman. Now, Haman, in the story, becomes the advisor, the main advisor to the king. Haman becomes the second most powerful man in the kingdom. And like a lot of people that are involved in situations where they get a lot of power that they don't really deserve, he got really arrogant and really mean and really condescending. And one day it's pointed out to him because the king had issued an order. Whenever Haman is out in public, if you see him, what were you supposed to do? You got to bow down. You got to bow down to him just like you would to the king. He's not the king, but you got to bow down to him because the king said so. But there was one guy that wouldn't do it. And of course, that's Mordecai, Esther's uncle. Mordecai, we don't know why. We don't know if he had met this guy, if he knew something about him, if he just knew how evil the guy was. But Mordecai's like, I'm not bowing down to that guy. I don't care. I don't care what the king says. I don't care what anybody says. I'm not bowing down to him. I'm not going to show reverence to that guy. So he didn't. Eventually, word comes to Haman. Have you noticed there's this guy that won't bow down to you? And they started investigating and they found out, hey, this guy Mordecai's not bowing down. And here's what they found out. He's Jewish. He's one of those people that Nebuchadnezzar brought all their relatives here, and he's one of them, and he's not bowing down. So Haman, being evil incarnate, decided, here's what I'm going to do. Now you would think, okay, let's admit, Mordecai's being a little stubborn, right? He's not doing what the king commanded. He's not going to do it. So Haman could have just punished Mordecai. He could have just said, okay, this guy's not showing me respect. I'm going to have him thrown in jail, I'm going to have him punished, whatever. But he didn't do that. Here's what he decides to do. See, this how you can tell how evil this guy is. He says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make an example. Not only am I going to kill him, I'm going to kill every Jewish person in the kingdom. Because I found out this guy won't bow down to me. He's a Jew, so here's what we'll do. We'll kill all the Jews. That'll show him. And he goes to the king, and he makes up this big elaborate story about how the Jews are not obeying the laws and this and that, and it's not true. It's just this one guy. But he gets the king to go along to it, and he promises the king, I'll pay a bunch of money to cover all the expenses. We're going to set one day, like 6 months from now, we're going to put all these publications out. We're going to tell all of our leaders all over the empire to round up all the Jews, and on this certain day, we're going to execute every single, we're talking about thousands and thousands of people they're going to execute in one day. Men, women, boys, girls, little babies, everybody. And why is he going to kill all these thousands and tens of thousands of people? Because one guy wouldn't bow down to him. One guy. That's how evil Haman is. So the king agrees. Now remember, what does the king still not know about Esther? She's Jewish. So when the king signs the decree, without knowing it, whose death warrant is he signing? Esther, the queen. But he doesn't know that because he doesn't know she's Jewish. Nobody does. And that gets us to where we pick up the story tonight. Now, the publication has just gone out all over the empire. All the Jews have found out they're going to round us up, and on this certain day, they're going to kill all of us. They're going to kill my wife. They're going to kill my children. They're going to kill my husband. They're going to kill my mom, my dad. They're going to kill all of us. And so you can imagine the terror that's going on in the Jewish community. Now, notice what happens. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, when he realized what had happened, when he realized this guy, to get back at me, he's going to kill all of us, tens of thousands of us. When he saw that, Mordecai rent his clothes. That just means he ripped his shirt, and it's just a sign of mourning, put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud and bitter cry. And you say, well, what's that all about? That's just a way of showing mourning. That's a way of saying something horrible has happened. So now he's making kind of this spectacle. He's refusing to wear normal clothes. He's wearing these clothes of mourning. He's got ashes sprinkled on his head. Everybody that sees him is like, what in the world is going on with this guy? It says, and he came even before the king's gate. For none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. Now he comes up to the gate of the palace, but that's as far as he can go, because they will not allow anybody dressed like he's dressed to enter inside the inner part of the palace. So he gets to the gate there, but everybody realizes, something really strange is going on with this guy. And notice what else is going on at the same time. And in every province, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting, and weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. Now, in other words, all over the empire, this is a humongous empire. When word came of what was going on, you can imagine all the Jews are in shock. I mean, they see this decree. If you're a father and you see this decree posted on a building somewhere, here's what you realize. They're going to kill me. And they're not just going to kill me. They're going to take my wife. They're going to take my children. They're going to take my parents. I mean, put yourself in that place. Imagine waking up one day and finding out that whatever descent you come from, whatever heritage you come from, that a law has been passed that on a certain day, everybody that's a part of whatever group you're a part of is going to be arrested, imprisoned, executed. Doesn't matter how old they are, doesn't matter how young they are, they're going to kill them all. So you can imagine the reaction. They're just in shock. And no wonder, they're fasting, they're weeping, they're wailing, and they're all wearing sackcloth and ashes, just like Mordecai, because they're in mourning. There's just this sense of unbelief. There's this sense of, how did this even happen? Who in their right mind would want to kill thousands of little boys and girls because they're mad at one guy who wouldn't bow down? So they don't know what to do. Now notice this. So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told it her. Now here's what they told her. Esther, who's living in the palace, and remember, Mordecai can't come into the actual palace area because of the way he's dressed. But Esther's servants, the people that look after the queen, they heard about it. And they know this is her uncle, this is her family. And they go to the queen and they say, hate to tell you this, but your uncle is kind of making a spectacle of himself. And he's out there right in front of the king's gate, and he's dressed in sackcloth and ashes, and everybody is looking and everybody is staring. And notice what she does. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent raiment or clothes to clothe Mordecai and to take away a sackcloth from him, but he received it not. And here's what Esther does. Esther's like, I can't have my uncle making a spectacle of himself out here. I'm the queen. He can't be acting like this in public. And so she gets some clothes together and sends them out to him and says, Uncle, put on some normal clothes and act like, you're supposed to act. Mordecai says, no, I'm not going to do that. Because he understands what's about to happen. Esther, who lives in the palace, is kind of protected from all this. She doesn't even really know what all's going on. So here's what he does. Then called Esther for Hatak. This again, one of her servants, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. In other words, the first group of servants come back. They took the clothes to Mordecai. He says, nope, not wearing them, not changing, not putting them on, don't care. They go back and they tell Esther, well, he won't take the clothes. He won't change. He's still out there in sackcloth and ashes. So she gets this one guy who she's got a lot of trust in, this guy named Hatak, and she sends him out and she says, go talk to my uncle and find out what in the world is going on. Because he is making this huge spectacle of himself. Go find out what it's all about and why he's doing this. So this guy goes out, and it says, so Hatak went forth to Mordecai in the street of the city, which was before the king's gate, and Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of money that Haman, remember that's the bad guy, that's the guy that's having all the Jews killed, had promised to pay to the king's treasury for the Jews to destroy them. See, a lot of people don't even know what's going on. A lot of these people live inside the palace, and they kind of live in that bubble of that world. and they don't know what's going on out there. They just get up every day and they serve the king and they do their jobs and they have no clue what's going on out there. Kind of sounds familiar in our day, doesn't it? A lot of people that live in that bubble in Washington that don't know what kind of lives you and I actually have to live sometimes. Well, nothing new under the sun, same way back then. So Mordecai tells him, and he says, look, you guys don't know what's happening. And he tells him about Haman, and he tells him about his plan, and he tells him about the plot, and he tells him how he's going to have the Jews destroyed. He says, go tell my niece what's going on. And also, he gave him the copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther and declare it unto her. He said, now listen, just in case she doesn't believe me, just in case she thinks I'm exaggerating, because this sounds so unbelievable that somebody would do something like this, Mordecai gets a copy of the decree that's signed by the king and says, take this to my niece, take this to the queen, and show it to her so she knows what her people are facing, so she knows what's about to happen. So they take it to Esther, and he says this, charge her that she should go in unto the king to make supplication unto him and to make requests before him for her people. Now, there's a couple of things here he's asking her to do. He says, tell Esther she has got to go to the king and talk to him. And she's got to ask him to help her people. Now, if she's going to do that, what is he saying that Esther is finally about to do? Reveal that she's a Jewish girl. He says, now look, here's what she's got to do. He sends this message back to Esther. He says, look, you've got to go into the king. You've got to go in there where he's at, and you've got to talk to him. You've got to tell him that you're a Jewish girl and that this guy's trying to destroy you and all your people, and you've got to ask him for mercy. You got to understand something. Here's something you got to get. Because this won't make sense if you don't understand this. You know, we kind of think, because we live in the Western world, we think, well, she can tell the king that any night because, you know, she's going to be there. That's not how it works. You didn't just spend time with the king whenever you wanted. You didn't just do that. Just not how it worked. The queen had her own area where she lived. She did not sleep with the king every night. She did not see the king every day or every night. She lived in her area of the palace. When did she get to see the king or sleep with the king? When he called for her. That's just the way it was. The king is way up here. Everybody else, including the queen, is way down here. She can't just walk in and say, hey, husband, I need to talk to you. It doesn't work that way. And that's exactly what she tries to explain. Hatak came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again, Esther spake unto Hatak and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. She says, okay, look, I understand what's going on. But my uncle doesn't get this. He doesn't understand. I just can't go in and talk to the king anytime I want to. It doesn't work that way. She says, go back and tell him this. Here's what she wants the guy to tell Mordecai. All the king's servants, that includes who? The queen. Everybody. Esther's saying that includes me. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, and we could add, or queen, if they come unto the king into the inner court who is not called, there is one law of his to put them to death. In other words, she says, you need to go explain something to my uncle. He doesn't understand. I can't just go in and talk to the king anytime I want to. It doesn't work that way. There's days go by, I don't even see him. I see him when he summons me. She said, here's the way the law is. If anybody just barges into the king's presence uninvited, what is the king totally at liberty to do? Kill him on the spot. You don't just barge into the king's inner sanctum. It doesn't work that way. And so Esther is trying to get word out to Mordecai so that he'll understand. She's saying, Uncle, I can't do what you want me to do. I can't go in there and ask him to save our people. I can't tell him I'm a Jew. I can't even talk to him until he calls me. Otherwise, I'm risking death. She said, except such, in other words, these are the only people that can come, people to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter that he may live. In other words, she said, here's how it works. If you walk in that room uninvited and you ask for the king, if you can speak to him, he said he may take that golden rod he carries. If he holds it out to you, that means he's going to grant you mercy and you can come on in and talk to him. But if he just sits there and looks at you, what are his servants going to do? They're going to kill you right there. It's kind of like if you've ever seen any of the old movies about the Roman Empire, if you've ever seen Gladiator, after a battle is over and somebody's wounded, the emperor steps up and he does one of two things. He either goes, that means they what? Live, die, kill them. She said, if he doesn't hold out that golden rod, you're dead. You're dead. And she said, that could very well happen to me. And she says, I have not been called to come in under the king for 30 days. She said, you think I see him every day because I'm the queen. I don't. She said, I haven't seen him in 30 days, and I don't know when he's going to call for me. So she said, I don't know what to do. Because if I just barge in, he may kill me. Now listen to what happens. They told Mordecai Esther's words. They told Mordecai, this is what the queen says. She can't go in. She can't do what you want her to do, because if she does, she may end up being killed. And I love this. This is a powerful part of the story. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther. He said, here's what I want you to tell my niece. Think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. Now, in other words, first thing he says is a little bit harsh. He says, listen, hon, don't think because you're the queen, you're going to escape. You're going to suffer the same fate as the rest of us. You need to get it out of your head, because I'm the queen. This guy Haman will never be able to put his hands on me. He said, you need to forget that. That's not going to happen. But then he says something so powerful, and I want every one of you here, if you don't hear anything else tonight, hear this. He says, for if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time. In other words, he said, if you don't help us, if you don't walk in there and take a chance and raise your voice for your people to try and save them, then there shall enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. You say, why is that so important? Do you hear Mordecai's faith? Do you hear what he's saying? Here's what Mordecai is convinced. He's convinced, what is God going to do for the Jews? He's going to save us. Here's what he's saying. He's saying, you can either be the instrument of our salvation if you will act on our behalf. He says, but I want to tell you something. If you don't, God will raise somebody else up. Here's what he's saying. God will protect us. One way or the other, God will protect us. Do you know how many times in life we get in situations and we think, okay, there's only one way out. There's only one answer. There's only one solution. Can I tell you something really important tonight? God is never limited to just one way out, to just one solution. God never looks at the situation we're in and thinks, if it doesn't go like this, and they're just in a world. No. God always has a path forward. And that's what Mordecai is saying. He's telling Esther, he's saying, look, I am convinced deliverance. Now notice, he never mentions God, as we said. But that's clearly who he's talking about. He's saying deliverance is going to come from some direction. But here's what he's telling Esther. Esther, it could be you. You could be the one that saves your people. If you don't, then God will save us from some other direction. But this is your chance. Now watch. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. Now listen to these words. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as That verse is worth the entire study in the book of Esther. Because here's what Mordecai is saying. Mordecai is saying, Esther, it just may be that God worked all this out, that God puts you right where you are for this moment. I mean, think about it. How unlikely is it that a young Jewish girl would wind up being the queen of the Medo-Persian Empire? The odds of that, about like winning the lottery, right? I heard a great illustration one time. A guy was trying to explain to people the odds of winning the lottery, and there was like a $400 or $500, $1 million jackpot, and everybody's buying tickets all over the country left and right. He said, here's your odds. He said, if you covered the entire state of Texas, you know how big Texas is? I'd always heard how big Texas was until the time came a few years ago that I had to drive through it. That's when you come in most states, you come in, a couple, 3 hours later, you're saying goodbye to that state. We drove for like 10 hours, and we're still nowhere, and we're still in Texas. And I'm like, good night. How long do you have to go to get out of this place? And it's forever. He said if you covered the entire state with quarters stacked on top of each other, and I think the way he described it was 10 quarters high, all over the entire state, and mark 1, put an X on 1. He said, here's your odds of winning the lottery. Walk into Texas, pick 1 quarter out of all those millions. That's how much of a chance you have of winning the lottery. Well, that's about what the odds were that a young Jewish girl who was basically a slave would be brought to a position that she's now the queen of the country. And the king is in love with her. And here's what Mordecai is saying. He's saying, Esther, it just may be that God puts you in that spot for this moment. Now here's what I want to suggest to you just real quickly. A lot of times in life we wonder, why in the world do I have this job? Why in the world am I living in this neighborhood? Why in the world am I going to this school? Why in the world am I in whatever situation? Do you ever stop and think maybe, just maybe, God puts you right where you are so that you could be an influence in bringing about salvation to someone there? That's exactly what happened to Esther. God perfectly positioned Esther to save her people. And you know what? It gives just so much more meaning to life if you think about it this way, that maybe, just maybe, God has me right where I am right this moment so that I could use my influence to reach somebody else that otherwise may not ever hear or be invited to church or hear the gospel message or find salvation through Christ. Mordecai says, maybe you're the queen for such a time as this. God put you here. Here's what he's saying. Don't miss your moment, Esther. Do you know that, you know what the greatest words of regret are? What might have been. What I could have done. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. Listen, I've been a pastor for going on near 30 years. I've been with a whole lot of people who were on their deathbed. People who knew that in the next few minutes, in the next few hours, I'm leaving this world and going into eternity. I've never had one single person tell me, preacher, I regret all those times I went to church. I regret all those times I tried to do the right thing. I regret all those things I tried to do for God. You know what I've heard over and over and over and over down through the years, though? Is people saying this, I wish I'd done more. I wish I'd done more. I wish I'd taken advantage of those moments where God could have used me. That's what Mordecai is saying to Esther. He's saying, Esther, don't miss your moment. This is your moment. This is your chance to do something amazing. Don't miss it. So listen to what she says. Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer. Go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, that's the capital city, and fast ye for me and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. She says, okay, here's what I want you to do. Get all the Jews in the capital city together, and I want everybody fasting. I want everybody thinking about what I'm about to do. Basically, she said, I want everybody to do what? I want you to pray for me. Even though the word prayer God never used, she said, that's what she's wanting. She said, I also and my maidens will fast likewise. She said, we're going to do the same thing for this set number of days. And she said, and then I will go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. Esther said, okay, uncle, here's what I'm going to do. I understand. This is my moment. This is my chance. This is my opportunity to do something great. I'm going to do something for God. I'm going to do something for my people. She says, here's what I want you to do. Get everybody together. And you guys fast, and you guys pray, and you guys think about what I'm doing. I'm going to do the same thing. And then she said, on this certain day, I'm going to walk into the king's presence. He may kill me. He may hold up the golden scepter and say, Esther, come on in. I'm glad to see you. She said, I have no idea. She said, but I'm going to do it. And here's words of great faith. If I perish, I perish. She says, never let it be said that I missed my opportunity. I am going to go in and see him. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how he's going to respond. I don't know what's going to do, what's going to occur, but I'm going to try. So Mordecai went his way, did according to all that Esther commanded him. And that's how chapter 4 comes to an end. And that's how our part of the story comes to an end tonight. Next week, we're going to see what happens when Esther walks into the king's presence, uninvited, unsummoned, trembling in fear, not knowing, are these the last seconds of my life? Or is God going to work all this out? It's an amazing story. I hope you'll be back to hear it. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the time that we've shared tonight. God, I do thank you for this amazing